Today we're going to be using paint, and what is different about paint than most balayage paint, any kind of clay based, is ours isn't clay based. Ours is like going to keep the moisture in the hair, and so as the moisture stays in the hair, it continues to lift, and that's how we get these great lifts with open air painting because of that. So today, because I am using a mannequin, I am going to use something that I love to use behind the chair, and it's by Color Track, and it's called Color Control Film. And so this is what it looks like, okay? And so they're 5x12s, and what I like to do, they're clear. So, and they're super, super, super thin. And so what I like to do is I like the fact that they will, I can just lay it on and I can see through it. So that's what I'm going to use today to keep that heat and keep it insulated and things like that. It's a little bit different than your normal film, like if you were to tear it yourself or use any kind of saran wrap or any kind of film like that that's very loose. This has some thickness to it, but it's also still thin and it's easy to use. So that's what we're going to use. I mixed my paint, and I'm going to show you really quick. This is the consistency of my paint, and I do it between like a 1 to 2 ratio. You can go 1.5 all the way up to 1 to 3. And I kind of like to do that 1 to 2, maybe in between a 1.5 and 2, but I like to keep it like that because it gives me a frosting, and that's kind of what I always want my go-to when I'm painting, is I want to have enough moisture, enough movement, but not so thick that it won't glide on the hair, but I don't want it to be too wet, okay? So that's what we're using for that. And as you guys come up on live, I know it's Sunday and hard, whatever, so you can always watch this on replay. It's going to be in the group. So as you come in and as you watch, let me know that you're here, and let me know if you have any questions in regard to what we're doing. So when you're first starting out and you're presented with your client, the first thing you always want to ask them is, where do you section your hair? Where do you part your hair? Do you section it on the side? Do you part in the middle? Are you a flipper? Do you go back and forth? These are all very common questions that you're going to have to ask, because if a client is not sure and if they are not literally committed to one part, then you need to part their hair down the middle and do it like that. If they are a side parter, then you're going to part it on the side and you're going to do it to wherever their part is. So that's going to be your go-to. So always ask how they part, and do they pull their hair back a lot, because the one thing you don't want is just to have streaks. You want it to blend, okay? So what we're going to do first when we're looking at this is, of course, this mannequin has had some issues. I mean, you can look at her. She looks a little messed up. I don't know if this one is Sabrina or not, because I called her Sabrina, but we'll see. We'll call her whatever she wants to be called. And so what we're going to do here is, she is a parter over here. We had a conversation before we came on, and this is where she parts. This is her go-to, okay? So what we're going to do is, the first thing that we want to do is look how the hair falls naturally. Does she have cowlicks? Does she have a widow's peak? Because when we're looking at blending out and doing these blonde ribbons, less is going to be more. So everything we paint needs to be intentional. It needs to be on purpose, because if not, you're going to get an oversaturated blonde, and that's not what we want to do here. Less is more. So we're literally going to put in maybe 2 to 3 on this side, 2 to 3 on this side, and that's it. You're not talking about oversaturating the head at all. You're going to want to use their negative space. Now, if you have a client who's presented with already previously lightened hair, you can also go through and do low lights at the same time to create that dimension. But we're not going to do that today. So what we're going to do is, we're going to make sure that we're looking at her part and where she parts. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a zigzag section at her part. So when I'm going right here, I'm literally going to zigzag, zigzag, and I'm doing it wide. Zigzag, zigzag. I'm going all the way to her crown. And then we're going to do it like that. So we're going to lay it down. So this is what you should see on the head, if you guys can see that. And what's important here is, for this is because we don't want, when she does flip or she does part, we want to have these panels That way there is darker hair laying over on top. That's how you're getting that dimension and how you're not being so overly blonde just on top. So the zigzag is going to be important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to part and take this little section and I'm just going to pin it away so I don't get access to it. I don't mess it up. Okay, so now we're going to start working with the peaks of the hair and what we have. So what we're going to do is now this is where her section of hair is, okay, right here in the front. Let me turn her so you guys can see. So there's this peak all the way up here to the hairline, okay, right here. So what we're going to want to do is I want to take this section and marry them together. So what I'm going to do to get that is I'm going to take my comb and go right here in the middle of this part. And I'm going to split this up, okay? So I'm going to take this section and I'm going to split it up. So I have a good 1-inch section here. And then I'm going to take this section here and I'm just going to go diagonal, okay? And I'm getting, this is my panel that I'm going to paint. So this is what it's going to look like. See how it has enough thickness? And I have enough thickness over here because I'm not saturating underneath. I'm only going to be surface painting. But what's going to happen is I'm looking at the natural fall of the head. So when her hair falls, I need to make sure to know that I'm going to get those dips in those ribbons, right? So I'm not going to go all the way up the head here. I'm going to go higher here and I'm going to go lower here. So my saturation is going to look like this. Okay? I'm going to go higher because I'm closer to the head and I'm going down here. So how I want to blend this is I'm not going to do deep tease. I'm literally just going to take the surface of the hair and I'm just going to gradually tease it up, okay? I'm not messing it up. I'm not going all the way in and teasing. I'm just going to do right at that surface and kind of mat that little area up just because I'm not going all the way underneath here. I don't need to mat and tease her hair all the way. I'm just taking a little bit of that surface, holding on to that tension, and I'm just teasing that hair just on top, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get my film ready to go, okay? So that way I'm ready whenever I want to lay that, that color, that hair down once I paint. So I'm going to make sure I grab the piece that I grabbed. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn her so you guys can see. And I'm going to take my lightener and I'm going to put it right here just on the top of my hand. And I'm going to mix it. I'm not going to mix it all the way in the bowl. I'm going to mix it on my hand because I don't want it to be sitting too long processing inside the bowl, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out midstream and I'm going to start painting. Again, we're keeping this part dark. So I'm literally just going to start right here and I'm going to add as I need to, okay? And again, I need to make sure that I am saturating this section good, but again, I'm not saturating underneath. You see how the underneath is empty? Again, dimension, and that's what we're doing. We're doing small panels, nothing too crazy, but the less is more when you're wanting those real big impact blonde pieces and those ribbons. So I'm just hitting along the top here, making sure that I'm saturating enough, and that is the most important when it comes to this. Again, keep the tension on your hair so that way you can use it for what you need. Make sure you're saturating at this root. It needs to be saturated all the way from here down to process effectively. So now I'm just going to go through here and then making sure that it is fully saturated. Now, what I'm going to do is start taking in where this other piece is, and I'm not going to go very far. I'm just going to go up to blend it out just so that it's not so harsh, and then I'm going to come back down. And so now I can go straight across on these ends because everything else is blended, right? So all that looks good, all that's blended. So I just need to come down here and just saturate this really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the way here and I'm going to put my film. Again, see how clean that is? So what I'm going to do is just put my film down. I'm going to hold it. And then I'm going to go on this end right here and just make sure that I have this end fully saturated. Okay. And so I'll lay it down, and then I'm going to take another color film and I'm just going to lay it on top. So we'll just drag this down and meet them. Hang on. And it's going to be hard to keep this here because you don't have any color underneath, but there we go. Boom. So that's done. So that whole area is done. That's going to be your panel for the front. So then I'm going to go over here in the back. Yeah. So I'm trying to keep my hands clean, okay? So then I'm going to go over here in the back. So again, we have this peak that's right here where we stopped, okay? So because that's low, now I'm going to take the rest of that peak that's right here, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing. So I have this peak in the back. So let me move her where you can see her. And the peak is here. So we got the two peaks that are right here. And this is going to cover our back end. So I'm going to take diagonal section and take diagonal section in this back. So here I have this piece here. So you see I have a chunk. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. And again, this is going to be, it's brick laid and zigzag. So you're not going to have too much of an overlay here because again, this is low and this is going to be higher. So now I'm going to go through and hold with tension, and I'm just going to mess that little top layer up. I'm not going all the way down in there. I'm just hitting that top. And I'm just surface doing it, okay? Nothing too crazy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my product and I'm going to stick it on my hand. And then we're going to start again at the mid strand, okay? I'm hoping I don't get bleach everywhere. I feel like I am. Okay. So I'm going to put that product on my hand. I'm going to start the mid strands first and making sure that I'm saturating this part first. So I'm going to go back to my hand and keep getting product. And what I'm going to do is I'm working my way up and making sure that I have even saturation. So I'm still working up all the way to that peak, but I want to make sure that I have enough product on my brush that I'm not creating where it's going to be too warm or not enough product at this top. And this is the reason why we tease, because it keeps that locked in and it keeps it from looking spotty and looking like you've missed some areas. So now I'm coming along this back end, and again, if I'm going to want to lightly blend that, I'm just going to lightly feather up, nothing too crazy, and then I'm going to finish out and just make sure that I have even saturation. So if I want to softly blend something, I'm going to change my brush from a horizontal to a vertical, and I'm going to go and glide up. If I want more coverage, then I can take my brush horizontally and I can go in there and do that. So I'm going to drop this really quick to get my film. So we're going to put that there. And I'm just going to hit this bottom. And I'm just going to lay a film on top. You'll want to definitely put a towel around you because around close, so that way you could use it so you can wipe your hands and you can do all of that. So now I'm going to switch her around and we're going to do this other side. You're going to be mindful that when you're using your hand, you still have product here and you haven't wiped it off. So be mindful when you're going on this side of the head that's going to be on your hand. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing with our zigzag here. So here's our zigzag. So what we're going to do is going from this point here. Okay? So let me get my comb. So we're going to go diagonal, back, to this, and then we're going to come up here, and I'm going to go in the middle of this peak here. So this is what we're working with, this little section right here. So this is what we painted before. This is our negative space that we have to create the motion, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to surface tease, and I'm just teasing this area. So we're going to swing all this back up, and I'm just teasing this little front area. So again, my high points are going to be towards the face. So my high point is going to be here, my low point is going to be here, okay? And again, the reason why we alternate and we do the high point to low point and we even have that is because you've got to have the highs and lows for it to look like a ribbon, to look like it's effortless. So let me turn her just a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to start here and go heavy. I feel like I need a little bit more depth because she's a little bald-headed in certain areas. So I'm going to add just a little bit more to give me some kind of bottom here, okay? And those are things that you're going to have to deal with, you know, with a real client, because, you know, clients have different densities in different places. So you just have to be aware of when they go thinner. It's just going to be one of those things that there is no fixed formula when you're painting on each person. And that's just with anything. There is no fixed formula. You have to go with what's presented to you and do the best that you can. And so this is going to be super saturated again. So I'm going to make sure my mid strands are saturated at the point that I'm going higher. And then I'll make sure that it's still saturated. But again, instead of me going down, I'm going up to feather up. And so I can softly blend this. But I want to make sure there's enough product up there that I can get the brightness and get that impact all the way up here. If I don't want to have brightness coming directly from the root, what I will do is I'll softly just blend it up, and wherever I want that brightness to start, I need to make sure that I have enough saturation there. So if I didn't want to have it to be very bright here, I would just blend it up just a little bit and not have a lot of product on my brush, okay? For you to have that soft blend right there, you could totally do that instead of having to melt it at the bowl. So I want to make sure these two sections are blended well together, that I'm not going to have any bleed marks. But again, when I'm literally just kind of blending from here, and I'm just feathering up just a little bit. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm going to take my brush horizontal and make sure that I have enough saturation here in this section. And then I'm going to take my film, I'm going to put it down, and then I'm going to make sure just to brush on the ends and finish it out. Okay, so I'm going to make sure my film stays on the hair like so. And then I will put this on top. So again, we're not painting the underneath, okay? So you're not going to be dealing with that, okay? So now we're going to go to the front of the hair. And again, you're not having to do a lot. This is not like a bunch of areas. To get those impacts, less is more. Use the negative space. Use their hair for that, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of that peak. So I don't know if you can see with her hair, but this is the hair that we pulled here. So I'm going to use the rest of this, and I'm going to marry it with her front area here, okay? So because she's the mannequin, I can tilt her in a way, but obviously when it's a person, you can't do the same thing. So I'm just going to take this, and I'm going to create that same diamond and have the front. And I'm going to leave this in the front, this little section, for dimension around her face. Let me find a little hole. Hang on. Come on, Sabrina. So I got a little bit of lightener on her hair, so I'm going to break that up so it doesn't process. So we're going to leave all this dark. So I'm literally just going to do the highs and lows right here. And I'm having trouble. Hang on. So you guys can see. So this is what we're painting. So this is the little section here. So this is where her front bang area is. And this is going to be low. So I'm going to go high here and low here. Okay? Because here's the thing. when we lay her hair down, here's a high here. If I go high here, it's going to be too much of a chunk here. So I'm going to go high here, leave this out for dimension, and then I'm going to go low here. So that way, here's her ribbon, and then here's her ribbon, okay? So that's what we're going to do here. So let me switch her up, and I'm going to paint her really quick. Again, you're going to want to put some product on your hand and mix it up on your palm on the front. So I'm going to make sure, and then we need to make sure that we tease just the surface as you come on. If you have questions, if you're watching this on replay, make sure you tell me that you're replaying it, and that if you have questions as I'm going, I will make sure to come back and answer those. But I'm just teasing just this surface, okay? So you got to keep your sections clean and make sure you know where you're at all times and what you're doing and where you're going, okay? So now I'm going to look and see where I'm at. So I'm going to go ahead and start down here first. And I'm going to make sure that I have tension on my hair and that I'm doing exactly where I want to be. And I'm going to start feathering up. And notice how I'll work on one side first. I'm not trying to do this whole bottom and then come back up. So I'm going to make sure that I have enough saturation where I want to, and I'm staying on one side, and then I'll blend it up, okay? So I'm just making sure that I don't have any holes in any places that I don't want them, because if you see holes, then that means you don't have enough product. And so what's going to happen is it's going to process unevenly. So you want to make sure that you're eyeing and seeing how the hair is going to fall and looking at, as it processes, what this is going to look like, okay? So I'm just going to blend that up just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is, because this sheet is so close right here, I'm just going to use this and just blend it down. And then I'll just put a color, a foil on top. And then we're going to put this on top like this so it can process. And that's it. That's all we're going to do. That is really, it's that simple of seeing where you're sectioning off and what you're doing. And you're going to make sure that you have to know that as the hair falls, that's what you want to look at. What the hair is going to look like, how it's going to fall, do they have cowlicks, all those things that you would naturally be concerned about. And know, like, for instance, when you're working with the back of the head, you know, the biggest thing is that when someone's the back of their head, sometimes they have cowlicks that stick up. Sometimes they have cowlicks that literally just split their head in half. And so you've got to make sure that you can't just force that hair. You're going to have to color it to how it splits, because if not, you color it one way, and then when it does what it's going to do, it's going to look different. And so the placement needs to be along the lines of where the cowlick is, and where that stuff, that's going to be super, super important, okay? So we're going to let this process for 30 minutes room temperature. Sometimes you can do this where you can put it under heat. With these, you can put them under heat. But what you have to remember is you're only concentrating the heat up here and not down here. So you're gonna have to use a developer based on the AC that your salon is in. If it's too cold, it won't process correctly. So anything but like above 72 in a salon, sometimes it can get hot, and how I got lightener on my hand, I do not know. But sometimes it can get hot, and I understand all that, but when it's too cold, it slows the process down. So you just want to make sure that all that is good, and that, you know, sometimes if it gets too hot, you can kind of put a personal fan on you. But to process this, if you want to stick it under heat, you can. I always do mine, let them process 30 minutes room temperature, and then they're usually good to go. If you have someone who has darker hair, like this is like a level 5, if you have someone in the 3 and the 4s that really wants that high impact, I would change over into doing brilliant paint along with diamond, mixing those two together and using foils for bigger impact. If they're okay with having some type of warmth and some type of natural warmth, you can totally use paint and totally get a natural way that way. But this is so good because you can actually see what you're doing. You can use these films because it actually like helps you see what's going on. So we're going to process for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to dry her and do all that, and I'm going to come back and show you guys what she looks like.